Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description.
In today's episode, we're going to be discussing KPMG and some news that just came out about them. The Australian Financial Review recently had an article about issues facing KPMG's mandatory retirement age. And it seems like there's always something going on with the big four accounting firms in Australia. Australia seems to have the most regulation, even more than Europe. And the reason that this story is coming out is because a lawyer for KPMG sent an email that said there was not a defense for KPMG just because the partner who is joining knew about the mandatory provision, the mandatory retirement age. And this was a leaked email. Basically, their lawyer said, even though you guys let the partner know that there's a mandatory retirement age, it doesn't mean that it was legal and that we can use that as a defense. Basically, you can't force somebody to retire. The accounting firms can have it as a voluntary provision, but even then it might not be legal in Australia and other locations because they might use it to intimidate employees, or they might take actions that are illegal to get the partner to retire. And this isn't the first time this has come up. The Big Four have faced this controversy many times and will continue to face it. They faced it in countries all over the world, and they faced it in the United States. And this is similar to them facing class action lawsuits about overtime pay all the time. You see cases where young people file claims that they should be paid overtime because they work so many hours. But if you work at the big four accounting firms, you know that you get a salary and you don't get overtime. However, employees always sue because they end up working thousands of hours of overtime. Not thousands, but probably about 1,000 or a little bit less. And this is just a ton of hours to work above a normal standard hour rate for people. And sometimes the people that file the lawsuits win, and sometimes they lose. And by win, I mean they get settlements. They don't necessarily take it the full way, but the big four settle because they want to get out of the headlines. And sometimes these class action lawsuits get really big because you have so many disgruntled employees leaving the big four accounting firms. But going back to the KPMG Australia story, KPMG has a voluntary retirement age of 58. And in the United States, the Big Four typically have this number at 60 years old. However, partners get around it by being on global leadership teams. And this means you can stick around longer at the Big Four accounting firms if you're on really big leadership teams. And this means you're like an executive at the Big Four accounting firms. And the reason the Big Four have this provision is to motivate young people to stay with the firms. Most partners would never leave if it wasn't for this provision, because many partners make a lot of money and they don't do that much work. So in their later years, they could coast on their big networks of relationships and clients that the Big Four doesn't want to lose, because it's easier to win work when you have really good relationships. And the partners don't do as much work. They review less and less as time goes on. And this is why you have a lot of the ethical problems in the Big Four accounting firms, because the top of the top partners aren't getting as involved as they should be. And you need to motivate young people to work and stay at the firm. So they need to keep these mandatory retirement ages for partners. Because in other industries, you see this problem. Think about politics. And I'm going to specifically talk about the US because that's what I know. We have people that are in politics in the United States that are 80 and older, and some are even close to 90. So you have these people that never leave their positions and don't get young people the opportunity to step up. And so they don't retain the best talent. So the Big Four I believe the Big Four need this provision, even though it doesn't seem fair to older people. But I think this is something that the Big Four need to keep. And I agree that the Big Four need regulation about employees' rights because they do take advantage of employees. But I don't think this is a bad rule for the Big Four. I think mandatory retirement for partners is good because the people forcing millionaires to retire is not a bad thing. Forcing people with a stable job to retire forcing them to retire is bad. And that's where this law would normally apply. However, really rich partners are trying to take advantage of that law as they try to take advantage of a lot of things. And I think this is just incorrect. And I wanted to highlight this story to show a little bit more into the big four accounting firms and how they work, because partners make a lot of money and they're partners for a long time. If you make partner when you're in your 30s, you could stay at the big four accounting firm for 20 plus years making a partner salary, which is extraordinary. So you don't really need to stay beyond 60. However, this is a very lucrative job and the pay is extremely high for partners. So of course, you're going to see this happen more because they don't want to leave. But I think this is an area that is actually a good rule for the big four accounting firms. And they put it there for a reason. They put it there to protect themselves. And also, you don't have to feel sorry for these partners, because even when they retire, they still get a pension from the accounting firms. So they make tons of money either way you look at it. They just make less if they retire. And I think this is important for the big four accounting firms to keep this mandatory retirement age. And I think if partners get to stick around longer, you'll have many more errors at the accounting firms and much more corruption. And I hope regulators and courts see this problem. So that's the update for today. To get future updates, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and also support us financially through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes to this podcast and the description on YouTube, because it helps put out more content, enables us to work on this more, do more research, things like that. And if you can't do that, just subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video on the YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.